What the hell? Gods of Egypt, directed by Alex Proyas, stars Gerard Butler and Nicolas Coster-Waldau. The story puts the Egyptian gods living among the people of Egypt, and Egyptian god Horus is taking the place of his father, Osiris. Unfortunately, the brother of Osiris, Egyptian god Set, returns and is taken over as the ruler of Egypt. It's now up to Horus and immortal hero Beck to save the world from Set and rescue his lover. I've heard a lot of things about this movie before viewing, but with any film that I watch, I go in with an open mind. But unfortunately, I made the biggest mistake of judging a book by its cover, because oh my god, Gods of Egypt is complete garbage. I mean, what can I say? This film is bad, but it's fascinatingly bad. From the start of the film, I thought it was shaping up to be something decent, but the fact that it started off with narrative exposition already began to worry me. It's not in your face like Artemis Fowl where they're going, oh yeah, this god is strong, this god is powerful, this god did this and shit like that. But it was still something that I took note of, and there's a couple other times in this movie where the narrator randomly pops in, but that's not even the worst part about the beginning sequence. Let's just say that this aerial shot of Egypt is probably one of the ugliest looking shots I've seen. And unfortunately, this is highlighting one of, if not the biggest problem with this film. Now don't get me wrong, there are a small handful of effects in this movie that are fairly decent to look at, but the majority of the film, oh my god, these effects are not fun to look at. And as much as I wanted to keep myself invested in this whole story, the effects were just so distracting that it just took me out of the story entirely, and I couldn't focus on anything else. It also didn't help that every 10 minutes in this film, it gives you some sort of fight sequence with the effects integrated within them, and they're so laughably bad that it looks so much like a video game. I'm serious, this whole movie just felt like an hour-and-a-half long cutscene from a video game. The effects were that bad to look at, and they didn't even look finished. Even the green screen effects for some of these shots are completely unconvincing in every way, and the way some of the actors are lit in some of these scenes make it all the more bad. I mean, my god, this film was made in 2016 for God's sake. One of my favorite films is The Mask with Jim Carrey, and something that I really love about that film is how they were able to blend the style of 3D animation along with the live action world. The fun and crazy effects blended so well with the live action world, and with a film made in 1994 with a budget of $24 million, that's truly disappointing in the case of Gods of Egypt. And you know, it honestly didn't help that I viewed this film in 4K UHD. I probably would have found the effects a lot more convincing if I just watched it in standard definition. Something else that I found odd about this film is how seriously it tries to take itself. Throughout this film, there are many moments where it's trying to act like it's bigger than life itself, especially with scenes involving Gerard Butler. I swear, almost every scene involving Gerard Butler just has him acting like the big, bad guy every single time, and he's playing it up so freaking much that it's just silly to watch. You are truly the best in the army. The soldiers are waiting to fight us. Take your share of gold. I am the greatest god. I'm only paraphrasing some of these lines, but trust me, it is a lot sillier in the movie. And the fact that some of these effects are integrated within these scenes, it just makes it more and more confusing. Just look at some of these scenes from the movie and don't tell me that you didn't at least chuckle at how much they're overplaying it.
But you, my legions of the desert, will bring them reckoning! Tell my brother who it is you worship!
Ah, look at the top of his head!
Come, Apophis!
Crawl back to shadow, you stinking worm!
Curse you! You little lying Delilah!
And you know, it also tries really hard to be funny with some of the characters just cracking random jokes once in a while, but Every time they make a joke, it just comes out of nowhere. It completely messes with what tone this movie is trying to follow, and it seems to work in reverse. I honestly found myself laughing at the fact that they were being so dramatic in their performances, and I found myself cringing every time they tried to make a joke. It just felt off on so many levels. Something else that this movie can't seem to take its hands off of is using the slow-mo shots in almost every scene. I mean, as if the dramatic performances weren't enough already, but they use it during most of the fight scenes, which is a horrible idea, considering they use way too much CGI in the fights already, so all they're really doing is showing off how bad the CGI is. What's even funnier is that they decide to use the slow-mo shots in the most random scenes, like this one.
So take your fill of gold!
Why did it need that? You know, it's honestly no wonder now why this movie couldn't render their effects fully. Why spend so much time adding these stupid effects to random scenes rather than taking the time to fine-tune all the CGI, especially if it's going to be in the majority of your movie? Something else that was really confusing about this movie is how it decides to treat death like it's absolutely nothing. Minor spoilers here, but who cares? This movie's complete garbage anyway. There are 2 characters that die in this movie, technically 3, but that's up for interpretation. But Beck's girlfriend, Zaya, ends up dying early on in the movie, and he only wants to save Egypt if she comes back. Well, for one, I think Beck is a completely unlikable character in this movie, because that's all he cares about. He's willing to let millions of people be enslaved just because he can't make his dick feel big anymore. Zaya ends up coming back anyway near the end of the movie, so that made her death completely pointless. Another pointless death in this movie is Jeffrey Rush's character as Ra, the sun god. He ends up dying near the end of the movie just for Gerard Butler to steal a spear, but ends up coming back to life literally 15 minutes later. I know that's me nitpicking here, but if death in this movie means that the character is just gonna come back to life in just a few scenes, what's the whole point of it? I mean, imagine if Darth Vader just randomly came back to life in Return of the Jedi.
I won't leave you.
Oh, sorry, Luke. I just had to close my eyes for a bit. Hey, you want to get some blue milk or something? You know, I've already been talking about a lot of negative things about this movie, but what I'm about to talk about right now is probably the most baffling thing about it. Okay, so hear me out here. This movie is called Gods of Egypt. We're following Egyptian gods throughout this movie, and the story follows Horus, an Egyptian god, who has to fight Set, an Egyptian god, in order to reclaim the place as the ruler of Egypt. If you don't know where I'm going with this yet, allow me to explain. From the moment they introduced Butler's character, Set, something started to cross my mind. Gerard Butler is Scottish, and he looked a little bit odd in this movie. And that's when I noticed that the studio went ahead to give him a nice tan for this movie. And get this, believe it or not, the majority of actors in this movie aren't Middle Eastern. They're from Australia. What the fuck? I thought this movie was called Gods of Egypt, not Gods of Australia. It's one thing to get the special effects in the movie wrong from the get-go, but if the movie isn't even going to take the time to hire actors of a Middle Eastern descent, how am I supposed to take this movie seriously? I'm serious. You can go check the cast list of actors for this movie right now, and you're going to see that the majority of them are from Australia, with the exception of Gerard Butler being from Scotland, and some of the actors being French. You know, the Beauty and the Beast live-action remake, somehow got away with not casting French actors for their roles, but at least those actors were from the same continent. Australia's not even close. Oh my god. I don't know how confused Alex Proyas was when it came to the casting choices for this film, but it truly amazes me that Egypt in this movie is dominated only by Australians. So yeah, Gods of Egypt is horrible. It's horrible on every level. Every second of the movie just had me sitting there wondering what the hell were they thinking when they were making this. The special effects aren't the worst I've seen, but are still pretty bad for a 2016 film. The film is taking itself way too seriously than it needs to, and the fact that it didn't even have the time to get the ethnicities correct is truly astonishing to me. I guess you could say that it's one of those films that's so bad it has some sort of entertainment value to it, but trust me, you're probably going to regret you ever watched it to begin with. I really expected to be giving some sort of positive to this movie, but for me, it was just really difficult to take it seriously at all. It's one steaming pile of dog shit that really isn't worth your time as a normal viewing. I don't know, maybe give yourself a few drinks beforehand. Maybe you'll find a little bit of an entertainment value then. Yeah, so for me, unfortunately, I'm gonna go ahead and give Gods of Egypt 1 out of 10 pyramids. No, kangaroos. Because we're not even in Egypt. We're in Australia, mate.
Crawl back to shadow, you stinking worm!
I swear, they should have just named this movie Gods of Australia. At least it would have made sense with the actors. But anyways, I'd like to know, what do you guys think of Gods of Australia? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you not care to watch it? I'd love to know in the comments below. If you made it this far in the video, I'd appreciate it if you leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel for more future movie content. Thank you guys for joining me in this review. And until the next one, you guys, I'll see you later.